large and mostly silent group of 10 or more performers who help to present Giselle's stories in a dreamlike way. Notes on machine. There are several places in the text where a reference is made to the sound of the machine. This is not intended to be any literal machine or a recollection of some sound. It is instead rhetorical, meant to be representative of the crushing intensity of Giselle's dark memories. Act 1, Scene 1. The first thing we hear is the grinding of the machine. Giselle is standing alone at center stage. She is in the middle of her memories, neither young nor old. She stands still, proud, her spine unbent.
In the village of Vilnius, in the time before war, when the great Western powers posed and preened and pretended to care about the Polish people, we were driven from the Jewish district, from our homes, from our businesses, and herded to the broad-tiled avenue of Gedimus, down to Getastoto at the edge of the river. There, as the street lulled into a soft valley, lay a crossroad. Turn to the left and to go south. Down to the forests on the outskirts of the city. Turn right, you go north, to the old town, to the industrial district. They drove us to the crossroad and presented us with a choice. South to the forest, north to the old town. Each way was life, each way was death.
The members of the company began filing down the aisles of the theater, paying no notice to the audience watching them, clutching at bags, whispering, murmuring. They gather around at the front of the stage, turning, gesturing, peering left and right, and past the foreseeable horizon.
The soldiers shouted, spat, whipped us, kicked, shoved, and cursed us with the harsh epithets. Schneller ihr Ratten, beeilt euch. Du nach links, du nach rechts.
As Giselle remembers this, we hear the shouting of SS guards, the hissing of police whistles, the angry barking of dogs, mixing with the low mumbling of the gathering crowd at the front of the stage. The assembled company gets more and more confused and panicky.
Each way was life, each way was death. Go to the north, go to the south, go left, go right. Who could make such a choice? I remember my grandparents saying, we'll split up. You go with your mother and your father and your sister Alicia to the village. We'll take your brother Noam with us to the south. My parents fought to keep us together, and I clutched my sister Alicia's hand tightly as the force of the surging crowd parted us down the middle, drove us apart.
The company is splitting off now, some couples holding hands or standing arm in arm before being wrenched apart. Some go left, some go right. Some try to dash from one to the other only to be dragged off by grasping hands.
That was the last time I saw my grandparents. That was the last time I saw my brother Noam. I saw them as they will always be, etched in my mind, carried away by the Nazis, by the tide of teeming multitudes, by the choice they made, as if by God himself.
The lights dim to black, and Giselle is lit merely by a single spot as she half sings the prayer for the dead.
Al molei rachamim shochem bamromim, amet semenucha anucha el chamfei hasheshina.
Suzy walks into Giselle's spot and takes her hand, and as she does, Giselle stoops, her posture and form aging her by 40 years.
Grandma, hold up. I don't understand.
What is it, Suzy, my angel, that you don't understand?
When you were driven from your homes, when they forced you down the street, there are so many of you and so few of them.
You are wise, granddaughter. You speak the questions of the scholars, the wisest among us. You speak directly to the Jewish soul.
So why didn't you fight back? You could have resisted. You could have said no. What's the point of following orders if you knew you were going to die?
But that's the thing. You didn't know you were going to die. There was doubt. There was hope. You always believed there was a chance to live.
How could you not know? How could you hope? You must have heard stories.
Yes. And in the beginning, that's all they were. Stories, nightmares, fairy tales be believed. Whispered fables from distant lands, from a friend, of a cousin, of someone else, of someone who claimed to have been there, to have seen.
Suzy shivers, unseen by Giselle. Continues telling the story, her back straightening, the years falling off her.
Mountains of corpses, women and children in the weak and the old, red brick crematoriums stained black with creosote, barbed wire fences surrounding haggard skeletons and shabby, saggy gray clothing, dark eyes, dead eyes that have turned blank and blind, but still see. Rumors, my love, myths, legends, fantastic fever dreams, never to be believed. The Germans, we told ourselves again and again, were practical people. What would be gained by such senselessness, such madness? Were we not useful to them? Did they not need us to build up their war machine? We assured ourselves with such practical thoughts and allowed ourselves to be led meekly, all in a line, like lambs to the slaughter. This was all many years ago.
I know.
I lived. I survived.
I know.
It's important that we live, Suzy. It was important to survive.
So you can bear witness?
Exactly. So we could bear witness. So we would never be forgotten. As long as we live, as long as we remember, then the monsters cannot win.
The lights come up dimly on Suzy's bedroom behind them. Giselle glances at the clock.
It's getting late, my Suzy. Time for you to go to bed.
Suzy and Giselle walk back into the bedroom, and Suzy climbs onto her bed. Giselle picks up a blanket and drapes it over Suzy.
There you go, my darling. There you go. Off to sleep now.
Giselle places her hand on Suzy's chest and begins praying.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Blessed is the name of his glorious kingdom.
Grandma,
Yes, my love.
I like how you share the Shema with me before I go to bed, but do you remember when I was a little girl?
Yes, I remember, my dear. Of course I remember. You want to hear the alphabet song again, don't you?
Giselle sits down in the bed next to her and strokes her hair as she sings the traditional Jewish folk song, Eufen Pripachik.
Eufen Pripachik, brengt ein Feuer und in Stub ist heiß, an der Rebelend kleiner Kinderlock, dem Aleph Beis, an der Rebelend kleiner Kinderlock, dem Aleph Beis.
The lights dim. Suzy lays her head down to sleep. Giselle stays at her bedside, humming a bit, before patting her gently and heading out of the room. From off stage, we start to hear again the curses and shouts of the SS guards and the barking of the dogs rising in crescendo, and above all else, the grinding of the machine. The company begins filing in again from all sides, walking in as gray ghosts. Suzy sits up in bed, sees the shadowy forms, and tries to shake off their visage, but the company continues to advance.
No.
Suzy tries to stand on her bed to avoid the grasping hands of the company, but to no avail. They grab her and pull her down onto the bed, and she screams. End of scene. Act 1, Scene 2. Giselle is sitting in semi-darkness in the breakfast nook, sipping a cup of coffee. Elaine is skittering about the kitchen, putting up dishes, wiping down countertops. She doesn't notice Giselle. She glances at the clock, walks over, and calls up the staircase.
Suzy, time to get up. Come downstairs. You'll be late for school.
Elaine goes back into the kitchen and pours herself a cup of coffee.
Suzy, come on down.
Good morning, Elaine.
Jesus, Mama. You practically gave me a heart attack. What are you doing lurking in the dark?
I like to sit here in the morning and watch the sun come up. Each day feels like a promise. A reminder that I'm still alive.
I wouldn't worry if I were you. I'm pretty sure that death is too scared to come after you. You know how everyone says there are worse things than death? I think those people may have had you in mind.
So, I can scare death now. It's not such a bad thing. It's like that t-shirt I saw in the window at that Spencer store at the mall. Heaven doesn't want me, and hell is afraid I'll take over.
You always told me that Jews don't believe in hell.
Some Jews do. Most Jews don't. Well, not hell exactly, but places like it, which we call Sheol or Gehinnom. It's like a waiting room, like a laundromat for the soul. You spend some time in silence and contemplation while your soul goes whisking and whisking around and around a spin cycle.
And is that what you believe? Purgatory or Sheol or whatever you call it?
And that's what most Jews believe, daughter. And as for me, I have already seen what hell looks like. I've seen demons wearing human skin. I need to believe in eternal damnation, if only to see those Nazi bastards get what they deserve.
Oh, Lord. Here we go again. Right back to the Holocaust.
What now?
Nothing. Nothing. Forget that I said anything.
What are you saying? What are you prattling on about?
It's just that ever since I can remember, we've been living under the shadow of the concentration camps, of what happened to you in the war. Every grace at mealtime is a prayer for the dead. Every fun family memory turns into a ghastly ghost story. Other little girls were told fairy tales of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. I was graced with the nightmares of Karl Otto Koch and the Beast of Buchenwald.
I am so sorry, Elaine. I am so sorry. I wasn't aware that my recollection of the Holocaust wasn't as important as a grocery store list.
At least my grocery store list has a beginning and an end, dear mother.
Believe me, dear daughter. My story will be coming to an end soon enough.
Suzy comes bouncing down the stairs, dressed for school and carrying a backpack over one shoulder.
Good morning, Grandma Gizzy. Good morning, Mom.
Good morning, Suzy. How was your sleep?
Suzy goes over to the cabinet and pulls out a box of Pop-Tarts, plopping down at the kitchen table across from Giselle.
It was fine, Mom. Nothing for you to worry about.
Are you sure, baby? I thought I heard you talking.
Oh, yeah. That was probably that dream about my friend Alina. You know how she keeps arguing with me about nonsense things, trying to get me to believe that the world is flat, or that John Kennedy is still alive, or that Neil Armstrong never landed on the moon.
Do you know how they were able to build the rocket ships that carried those men to the moon? Don't you, Suzy?
Let me guess. Was it the Nazis?
Actually, Mom, Grandma Gizzy is right about the U.S. government and the Nazis and the space program. After the war, the military grabbed Werner von Braun and a bunch of the other German missile scientists and snuck them into America to help us beat the Russians in the space race.
Von Braun. I think I remember seeing a picture of him on the cover of Time magazine when I was a kid. Sort of a dapper-looking man with a fiery missile over his head.
During the war, he used Jewish slave labor to build his V-2 rocket bombs. Over 20,000 innocent people were slaughtered so that Mr. Armstrong could take his one small step.
Yes. A lot of terrible things happened. It was a terrible time.
My friend Alina says that there's no way the astronauts could have survived the radiation explosion from the Van Allen belt. And besides, she said the shadows were all wrong.
Some of these people will tell you not to trust your own eyes.
And believe me, you don't want to get me started on Area 51.
Suzy, dear, don't you need to start heading out to school?
Holy smokes, I'm going to be late for the bus. Bye, Mom. Bye, Grandma.
Be good today. Be good today, Suzy. Be good. Learn, child. Don't be afraid.
I won't, Grandma. Oh, I almost forgot something.
Suzy runs back over and gives Giselle a kiss. Giselle kisses Suzy in return, and then Suzy starts dashing off.
Remember, I'll be picking you up after your soccer practice today. Meet me at the flagpole at 5 o'clock.
Don't worry, Mom. I'll be there. Love you.
Love you too.
Suzy exits.
I'm still glad to see that someone in this house still loves an old woman.
I'm sorry I snapped at you, Mama. I'm sorry I am so impatient. I had a pretty rough time myself last night. I woke up with a start when I heard Suzy in her room.
What did you hear? What was she doing?
Screaming.
Elaine sits back down coffee and squeezes her mother's hand.
I know you were telling her stories again last night. I listened to you from the hallway as you told her about the crossroad at Vilnius.
I know. She's young. She needed to hear. She needed to know the young need to be the ones to carry on the memories.
Why would you say that? She's still so young, Mama. Do you have to fill her head with darkness and pain?
She's lived a life of lightness and joy. She could use a drop of darkness and pain.
Why? So she can hear the same sounds and have the same nightmares that I did as a child? The dogs barking and the gas hissing from the shower heads and the scrabbling, scratching sound of fingernails digging desperately into unyielding doors.
I am sorry for your nightmares, Elaine. I am sorry for Suzy's. I am sorry for my own. Time is my enemy now. Every morning dawn a reminder that the sun will set at dusk.
I'm sorry too. I'm sorry for all you went through. But these memories of your past, they need to stay memories. They need to stay in the past. I lived my life haunted by your ghosts, Mama. By the ghosts of your family, the ghosts of your friends, and the 6 million other ghosts that live on as long as you hold on to them, as long as you don't let go.
I can never let go, child. I can never let go.
I know, Mama. I know. None of us can ever live in the present. None of us can ever let go.
Giselle and Elaine stir their coffees in silence.
Who is this person that Suzy mentioned? Her friend with all the crazy thoughts.
Alina, I've met her and her parents. They're interesting people.
Lena? Lena. What sort of ridiculous name is that?
I'm not sure, Mama. I think it's Arabic.
These kids today with the names. It's like the parents picked out letters from a bowl of alphabet soup.
I went to high school with a girl named Moonbeam and a boy named Ziggy.
Ah, well, everything comes full circle.
Giselle gets up and begins heading to the stairs.
Are you going upstairs to rest?
I got my sunrise and my hot cup of senka. I think I may just close my eyes for a bit.
I understand, Mama. I know that telling those stories, reliving those stories can be exhausting for you as it is for her.
Giselle stands still in the middle of the kitchen and closes her eyes. As she does, members of the company come slowly walking up to her as gray ghosts. She visibly reacts to their presence as Elaine continues to speak.
And I also understand how important it is for you to tell those stories, for you to share them with Suzy. You said before how thin she is and how fair, and how when she crooks her head and stares you in the eyes, she looks just like your younger sister who died in camp.
One member of the company, who bears a passing resemblance to Giselle's sister Alicia, walks up and takes Giselle's hand. Giselle shivers.
But Mama, she's just a little girl. She can't be your deliverance. She can't carry the weight of a million souls. No matter how good she is, how sweet, how pure, she can't be the one to banish your ghosts.
The company walks abruptly off the stage, leaving Giselle alone with her thoughts.
I know who my granddaughter is, Elaine. I love Suzanne, and I want what is best. I'll try not to burden her, to give her bad dreams. For her sake, daughter, as much as for yours.
And maybe for your own sake too? You look tired. You need to get some sleep.
I need to be free. Free from remembering. Free from the burden of my own bad dreams. But you're right, Elaine. You're right. I'm going to go upstairs and shut my eyes.
Giselle goes upstairs while Elaine sits, smiles, and sips on her coffee. She sighs and starts cleaning the kitchen while softly singing Eupen Prüfchick.
Eupen Prüfchick, bringt a fire und inch to his haze.
End of scene. Act 1, Scene 3. A school bell rings. From all sides of the stage, the company begins pouring out, this time dressed as teenage students from the 1980s. Denim jackets, leggings, backpacks saturated with buttons and patches and stickers slung over one Some are carrying lunchboxes or projects for class, others with black-cased band equipment and closely clasped trapper keepers. There is a cacophonous buzz in the air of a dozen conversations, rumors, murmurs, mutterings, youthful lamentations, and exhortations all at once, mixed with locker slams and the squeaking of shoes. Principal Crocker enters, plowing through the crowd, waving his arms and sending the kids to their classes.
Get to class, students, get to class. Get your books from your lockers and let's hurry down the halls now. Careful with that clarinet, Miss Snowden. Come on, Mr. Thompson, stop lollygagging. Mr. Jackson, Mr. Jackson, get that dial back to Miss Andres right this very minute, or as God is my witness, you will spend the rest of the week in school suspension right now. Now get to class, all of you. Go, go, go.
Suzy enters, hurrying to her class.
Ah, Miss Cohen. Wonderful to see you today.
Good morning, Principal Crocker. Have you seen my friend Alina this morning?
I'm afraid not. She's usually one of those children who gets dropped off at the last second and then spends the rest of her day hurrying, trying to make up for lost time. Come to think of it, I really need to speak to her parents.
It's all right, Mr. Crocker. I'm sure she'll be here eventually.
Principal Crocker starts to respond, and then his attention is caught by some misstep or misdeed by one of the students.
Miss Lee, Mr. Karakowski, I need to see you two in my office right now.
Principal Crocker is swallowed up by a sea of students and disappears from view. Mrs. Cavendish enters from the opposite side of the stage, waving her arms.
Oh, Suzy, good, there you are. I was looking for you.
Yes, Mrs. Cavendish?
We're continuing our World War II section this week, and I'd like to spend some time in class talking about the Holocaust. I remember you said that your grandmother was one of the survivors.
She was at Auschwitz, and before that at Buchenwald.
Oh, I'm sorry, dear. Will the lesson be too painful for you? I'll understand if you wanted to spend first period in the office with Principal Crocker.
Oh, no, Miss Cavendish, I'll be fine. Believe me, there aren't any stories you can tell me that would be worse than my grandmother's.
Yes, well, it was your grandmother that I wanted to talk to you about. Do you think she might be interested in coming in and speaking with the students? I'd have to send home a permission slip with everyone and give some of the parents a chance to opt out.
I'll talk to my grandmother, Mrs. Cavendish, but I'm sure she'd love to speak at the school. She always told me the young need to be the ones to carry on the memories.
Oh, well, she sounds, intense. Yes, all right, if you can ask her tonight and let me know first thing tomorrow.
The class bell rings again. The company starts marching off stage to grab chairs and assemble as a class of students.
I'll ask her, Mrs. Cavendish, and I'll see what she says.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right, students, have a seat and get your homework out from last night.
As the company starts pulling out work from their backpacks and notebooks, Alina enters. Her hair needs a comb and she is dressed somewhat haphazardly.
Suzy! Alina, thank goodness, there you are!
Alina comes running up to Suzy and the two girls hug. They head to the two empty seats at the back of the class and continue talking as Mrs. Cavendish and the other students mime the start of the class.
I'm sorry I was late to school today. My grandfather got into town last night from Czechoslovakia, and he was up half the night telling us stories.
Oh, I know that feeling. My grandmother kept me up too. What were his stories about?
World War II stories from the Eastern Front. He fought with the Russians. He said he was there at the siege of Stalingrad. He told us how the river Volga was on fire and how the bank was filled with the mutilated bodies of the dead.
And your grandfather survived that? That's hard to believe.
I know, it's pretty amazing. My grandfather said that when he returned home, he had to build himself back up from scratch. There wasn't a single member of his family left alive.
Suzy, Alina, would you two mind if I carried on with the lesson?
No, Mrs. Cavendish. Sorry, Mrs. Cavendish.
All right then, class. Let's all turn to page 323 in our books and take a look at the section on the Holocaust. I'm sure what a lot of you are asking is, in a modern society, in a civilized world, how could something like this have happened? How could the Nazis have possibly murdered 6 million Jewish people around Europe? Yes, Suzy?
It wasn't just the Jews, Miss Cavendish. There was also over 1 million people slaughtered who were gypsies or people with disabilities or homosexuals or communists or...
My grandfather told me that over 20 million Russians died during the war, and that tens of millions of people died of starvation and diseases.
Of course you're right, Alina. It was a terrible time, but our lesson today is about the Holocaust. The Nazis built the first concentration camp in Dachau in 1933, shortly after Hitler came to power. It originally was a prison for his political opponents, but was soon converted into a forced labor camp to carry out what the Nazis described as the final solution to the Jewish question.
The lights dim, and a video montage comes up on a rear projection. These are scenes of Nazis marching through city streets, of Jewish businesses destroyed, of stacks of suitcases and warehouses filled with clothing and piles of shoes and hair. And then films of the liberation of the camps, of the stacks of bodies, the bulldozers, the emaciated survivors.
Many people at the time couldn't believe that even a monster like Adolf Hitler could be capable of such vitriol, such vile hatred of the Jews of Europe. But no one should have been surprised. As far back as 1918, he made a statement that said, "Everything which makes men strive for higher things, whether religion, socialism, or democracy, is for the Jew only the means to an end, to the satisfaction of a lust for money and domination. His activities produce a racial tuberculosis among nations. The ultimate goal must definitely be the removal of the Jews altogether."
As Mrs. Cavendish finishes speaking, we hear the sounds we heard at the beginning of Act 1. The guards shouting, the whistles, the angry barking of dogs, mixed in with the sound of the massive machine grinding down. Alina turns her back on Suzy, and the company playing the students all turn around to stare at Suzy. From the wings, the remainder of the company appear as ghosts again, pointing their fingers at Suzy, their muted faces angrily screaming. Mrs. Cavendish gets to the end of her speech, and the lights come back up again. Alina raises her hand.
Mrs. Cavendish, if all of this was going on well before the war began, why didn't the U.S. get involved sooner? Why didn't they do more to help?
Oh, well, they didn't know about it, Alina. It was only after the war that they knew what was really going on.
That's not true.
Suzy, what's that? Did you have something to say?
I'm sorry, Mrs. Cavendish, but it's not true that we didn't know. My grandmother said that there was reports from all over the world.
I'm sorry, Suzy, I don't know what to tell you. As the textbook states very clearly, the United States did not know the details about the Holocaust until after their troops liberated the camps in 1944. Maybe your grandmother was mistaken. Maybe she just heard stories.
I don't think so, Mrs. Cavendish. Her memories are very specific.
Yes, Alina.
It wasn't the U.S. that liberated the concentration camps, it was the Russians. My grandfather fought in the Russian army during the war. He told me all about it.
The Russians may have liberated some of the camps, Alina, but not Auschwitz. My grandmother was there. She said it was the Americans who came to the camp.
No, it was the Russians. My grandfather was one of the soldiers that took part in the liberation. He should know. He was there.
My grandmother was there too, Alina. The soldiers handed out Hershey bars. She still remembers the taste of the chocolate.
Suzy and Alina continue to argue, and the rest of the class joins in with the general hubbub.
Students!
Everyone falls silent.
As it happens, I've asked Suzy if her grandmother could come and speak to us this week and give us her own personal account. Alina, why don't you ask your grandfather if he could come in as well? I'm sure it'd be wonderful to hear his stories. I assume the Soviets would let him come and speak to us?
Well, he's from Czechoslovakia, which is a socialist republic but not directly governed by the Soviet Union. But yes, Mrs. Cavendish, I'm sure he can make it. I'd love for my grandfather to meet all of my friends.
All right then, students, we'll pick up with the classroom activity over on page 333.
As the rest of the class turns back to their textbooks, Alina and Suzy talk en sotto voce.
I'm sorry that I argued with you, Alina. I don't want to lose you as a friend.
As if. We'll always be friends, Suzy, no matter what happens.
Best friends?
Best friends forever.
Suzy and Alina start going through their elaborate secret handshake routine.
I'm looking forward to meeting your grandfather, Alina. He seems like an interesting character.
He's from my mom's side of the family, the European side. My dad says everyone on my mom's side is an interesting character.
Well, you're definitely an interesting character.
Match, it runs in the family. And I'm looking forward to hearing what your grandmother has to say.
I don't know. She can be a little bit spooky sometimes.
Tell me about it. The first time I saw her, I thought she was a ghost. Of course, ever since I unblocked my third eye chakra, I see ghosts all the time. So that wasn't that out of the ordinary. But I've never had a ghost offer me a cup of herbal tea.
My grandmother has like every sample pack from Celestial Seasonings. She drinks them with honey from the health food store and a bag of these shortbread triangle cookies that she gets from New York.
Ooh, your grandmother is fancy. It'll be fascinating to have her come talk to the school. She really knows how to bring power to the people.
Power to the people. Power to the people.
Mrs. Cavendish clears her and both girls giggle. The school bell rings, and all of the students begin heading out of class. End of scene. Act 1, Scene 4. Giselle and Suzy are sitting at the kitchen table. Giselle is sipping on hot tea with her eyes closed and is reciting numbers from memory. Suzy is sitting across from her, writing the digits on her forearm with the black Sharpie marker.
A15.
A15.
101. No, wait. 05.
O1.
No, hold on. That's not right. Hold on. Rebecca, what you got so far?
A15101.
The first part is right. I know that, but the rest is off. It's not right. It's all out of order at the back end. Give me a minute. Let me think.
What do these numbers mean, Grandma? Why does it start with A?
Well, let me see. Where to begin? I was part of the first batch of the riot at Auschwitz back in 1942 when they started issuing the tattoos. The men's changed letters every time they got over 20,000. But over on the women's side of the camp, they apparently didn't get the memo. They kept on assigning numbers in the A series clear into the 30,000s. They used the number to keep track of you. In the camps, you were always just a number, never a name. They used the tattoos in the same way that a rancher brands cattle. Give me a second. Of course I know the number. They called it out every day at roll call. I know it better than I know my own name.
Giselle closes her eyes, and we hear the very faint sound of the machine again, and the sounds of the camp. We hear a voice calling out numbers. 1, 5, 0, 0, 9. 1, 5, 0, 1, 0. 1, 5, 0, 1, 1.
I won 5011. That's it. And the numbers mixed up. 15011. That was my number.
Suzy marks through the last 3 digits on her arm with the marker and writes above it.
15,011. You know what it is that I don't understand, Grandma?
What is it, my love, that you don't understand?
If you have the tattoo, why can't you just look down on it and read what it says? Why do you need to recite it from memory?
Elaine comes downstairs with a basket of laundry, listening in a bit on the conversation. Giselle smiles and rolls up the sleeve of her sweater so that her own forearm is visible.
Suzanne, Shane and Mabel, my beautiful girl. Many things are written down, recorded, and presented as fact. Textbooks are published, films are made, museums open their doors and put up their exhibits, but none of that is lasting. None of that is real. Anything can be changed. Textbooks rewritten, and video manipulated, exhibits changed or reinterpreted. The one thing they can't change, Suzy, is what is inside of my head, what I have seen, what I have remembered.
Grandma, that doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't?
Of course it doesn't. The memories you have in your head, they're not crystal clear. They're not actual representations of the past. They're buried, repressed, they're interpreted and misinterpreted. It's not a photograph, Grandma. It's just a bunch of hues and shadows.
Really? You know so much.
Alina talked about this book that she read and about how our brains actually process memories. What this book said, Grandma, is that we don't actually really have any memories. That memory you have from when you were 8 years old, that's a memory of a time when you were 9 years old and you were remembering being 8. And that memory from when you were 9 years old was actually your memory from when you were 10, and so on and so on. We're constantly recycling old memories into new memories, like a house you build by stealing stones from the foundation.
Not every memory, Suzanne. Not my memories from the camp. Not the face of my sister Alicia, or the cold flesh of my family.
Elaine gets up and walks into the kitchen. She sees that her daughter has written on her arm with ink.
Suzy, what is that? What do you think you're doing?
Grandma is telling me about the tattoos at Auschwitz.
And was it her idea to write on your arm with a Sharpie? Typical. So typical. Your grandmother plants a thought in your head and it grows there like a weed.
Come on, Mom. You know that's not fair.
Go upstairs. Go upstairs right now and wash that ink off your arm. And if it doesn't come off with soap and water, use the borax powder from under the sink.
But Mom.
Go. Go. You have school tomorrow. Go.
Elaine points at the staircase. Suzy rolls her eyes and then flounces away upstairs.
How could you, Mama?
How could I what? Tell her the truth? Show her my scars?
You sat right there in that chair this morning and you said you would stop telling these stories. You said you wouldn't burden her with your nightmares anymore.
She came to me with questions. What am I supposed to do? Pretend to be dead? Turn away my young granddaughter?
You see what it's doing to her. You know that she isn't sleeping, that she barely eats a thing, that she's nothing but skin and bone. She pecks at her food.
Well, I was as thin as her when I was her age.
When you were her age, you were shipped off to the ghetto. This isn't the 1940s anymore, Mama. It's the 1980s. People have changed.
You're wrong, child. You're wrong. Times may change, but people never change.
People change, Mama. There aren't Nazis anymore.
People never change, and there will always be Nazis.
I won't let you ruin my daughter's life the way you ruined mine.
You don't want Suzanne to know the truth, Elaine. You're afraid to let her see the world as it is. You want to keep her under a rock. She's not a child anymore.
She is still a child. You can't see that. All you can see is your goddamn ghosts.
Unseen by the other women, Suzy comes down the stairs. She sits in shadow at the bottom of the steps, listening.
You were too soft where Suzanne is concerned, daughter. You coddle her like she's still a baby.
You have some nerve telling me how to raise a child.
What is that? What is that supposed to mean?
You know what it means. You were never my mother.
How could you say that? I bore you with my phone.
And as soon as I came out, you shunted me to the side. I was cleaning and cooking and caring after Papa and my baby sister when I was half the age that Suzy is now, while you stared at the walls in your dark room and talked to the shadows.
How dare
I was the only mother the rest of the family ever knew. I never had a chance to be young.
You think you had it so hard because you had to get up early and put a box cereal for your sister, because you had to clean the house with the aid of modern appliances. When I was growing up in the village of Vilnius.
There it is. There it is. I knew we'd end up there again. Marching off to the gas ovens. Just your everyday, average kitchen table conversation.
Suzy steps out from the stairs, her cheeks wet with tears.
Mom? Grandma?
Elaine sees Suzy and walks over to embrace her.
Oh, my darling. Suzy, my love, don't cry now. Here, come here.
I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm sorry that I wrote on my arm. I hate to see the two of you fighting.
Giselle gets up and goes over to embrace Suzy, and then Elaine.
There, Suzanne. Don't let it worry you. Jewish mothers have been fighting with their daughters for millenniums now. Did you know that Yiddish has twice as many words for argue as it does happy? It's as much a part of our heritage as mutts.
The three women hold their embrace for a while.
You got most of it off. You can wear a long sleeve shirt tomorrow. It'll be gone before you know it. I think I remember you have one hanging on the back of your closet. I'll go up and I'll put it in the corner with the iron.
Elaine walks briskly upstairs.
Grandma,
Yes, my dear.
you know my teacher at school, Mrs. Cavendish?
She's the one who wears too much makeup, right? Likes to pretend she's cool and hip and, what do they say? Down with the young folks lingo.
No, Grandma. That's probably. Actually, come to think of it, that describes almost all of my teachers. Anyways, Mrs. Cavendish is my history teacher. She's the one that wrote that nice note on my Revolutionary War project.
Ah, yes. I remember that project. Something about the Betsy Ross woman. The seamstress lady that made the flag.
And Alina kept saying, no, that's a myth started up by her grandchildren.
I don't know where that friend of yours comes up with her ideas. Although, you know, it would be nice if you were to invent some kind of myth about me after I'm gone. You can tell people I was the inventor of the colander. Or the first Jewish woman to rocket into space.
We still have time to make that last one happen, Grandma.
I'll ask your mother to add some tang to her grocery list.
Anyways, in class today, Miss Cavendish was talking about the Holocaust and the liberation of the camp.
That's a day that shines brightly for me in the midst of all that gloom.
Was it the Americans who liberated Auschwitz, Grandma? That's what you've always told me.
Well, of course it was, child. Of course. I remember how clean they were and how fat. Big stocky men passing out Marlboro cigarettes and thick woolen blankets.
And Hershey bars?
Oh, yes. Those Hershey bars. I remember it was a warm spring day and the candy bars had melted a bit. My friend Hannah and I woofed them down and licked the sticky remains from our fingertips.
Elaine comes down the stairs and stays a bit in the shadows as Suzy speaks.
Okay, that's what I thought you had said. Alina's grandfather had come into town and he said it was the Russians who liberated the camp first.
What? No, it was the American troops. I remember the big green trucks and the strange sound of the Midwestern accents.
Her grandfather fought with the Russians in the war, and he said it was the Soviets who got there first. Mrs. Cavendish showed us this video that was taken from the camp.
Elaine walks in quickly, the shirt in her hand.
Here's the shirt I was talking about. I'll iron it tonight and hang it up in your doorstop knob for when you get up.
Thank you, Mom. Love you.
Suzy goes over and hugs Elaine, then turns back to Giselle.
Grandma Gizzy,
Yes, child.
my teacher asked if you might be willing to come to the school this weekend and talk to the students, you know, about the war and about your experiences.
Suzy, I'm not so sure that's a great idea.
Nonsense, Elaine. It's a wonderful idea. Suzy, you tell your teacher that I'd be glad to come in any time this week. You can't find the time to take me there, right, daughter?
If her teacher is asking and if it's what Suzy wants, I'll talk to my boss at work. I'm sure he can clear me time.
Great. Thank you, Grandma. Mom, I got Mrs. Cavendish's number in my backpack if you want to give her a call.
I have her number. I'll call her up right after we finish dinner.
Elaine goes over and takes down boxes and cans to start preparing dinner.
I hope my friend Alina can get her grandfather to come in on the same day. He said he was there when they broke through the gates. Maybe you'll recognize him, Grandma. Wouldn't that be something?
If he was there, my child, I could definitely know his face. This old mine is a strong steel trap. I'll come to your school and I will tell them about that.
Suzy hugs Giselle.
Love you, Grandma.
Oh, I love you too. I think I'm going to go rest in my room a bit. Elaine, can you let me know when dinner's ready?
Yes, Mother.
What are you making?
We're having tuna stroganoff.
From a box? From a can?
It's hamburger helper, Grandma. You know it's my favorite.
Is it mixing tuna with noodles and sour cream is such an ordeal?
Giselle exits. Elaine continues to work on dinner as Suzy comes up to her.
Mom, what did you mean when you said it wasn't a great idea? You know, bringing in Grandma to speak to my class?
Oh, well, you know, sometimes I worry about your grandmother. She likes to think that she's as sharp as a tack, but mentally, I think she's lost a step. You know, she has trouble sometimes remembering what she's doing or why she entered a room.
We all do that. I remember you spent almost a half hour looking for your pen you had tucked behind your ear.
But she's mixing up dates, Suzy. Not just dates, whole years. Sometimes drift by between one decade and the next. She told me she can no longer remember the faces of her parents or her grandparents. and I see her stare at you. At times, it's like she's staring at her sister who vanished in the camps. You're right. We all have times like that. The other day, I swear I could not remember the word for fire hydrant. I kept walking around talking about that thing the firemen stick their hoses into.
It'll be okay, Mom. It'll help Grandma to be able to share her stories.
I hope you're right. I really hope you're right. It's just that I grew up with your grandmother and her ghosts. I've seen the effect they can have on you. I've woken up from those same nightmares. I've seen firsthand the toll these stories can take on me, on you, on her. But it'll be fine. I'm sure it'll be fine. Now run upstairs and make sure your homework is done. I want you getting to sleep at a decent hour tonight. No more rushing out the door every morning.
I will. I promise. I love you, Mom.
Love you too.
Suzy exits, leaving her mother behind with a look of worry and concern. She walks back over to the stove to stir a pot. In the background, we see shadows forming and whispers, and the occasional muffled shout. And then, just out of range, but increasing in volume, the sound of the machine. End of scene. Act 1, Scene 5. Once again, the school bell rings. The company pours out, although this time they are entering as students attending Mrs. Cavendish's lesson, picking up chairs and placing them in an arc in the classroom space. Principal Crocker is standing at the front of the group, calling the kids to order.
All right, everyone, come in, put your bags down, and get seated. Quickly now. We have a lot to go through, and we don't have all day.
Mrs. Cavendish enters with Suzy and Giselle. Elaine follows, still looking worried.
Students, we are truly fortunate to be able to hear the stories of our two guest speakers today, who will give their own personal accounts of the Holocaust, where 6 million people allegedly lost their lives.
At the word allegedly, Elaine looks up sharply. Principal Crocker continues.
We're blessed to be able to have these special visitors today. I'll leave it to Mrs. Cavendish to tell you who they are. Before I do, let me remind every one of you that there will be absolutely no disruptions or rude behavior of any kind. I have a zero tolerance policy for anyone showing disrespect to our guest. So you can expect to be serving at least 3 days in school suspension for even the slightest transgression. Now, I'll be attending this lecture, standing at the back of the room, and believe you me, I will be watching you. Now, it is my pleasure to bring to you your teacher, Mrs. Cavendish, who will start us off with a brief introduction.
Mrs. Cavendish steps forward to address the class while Suzy looks around anxiously. Alina suddenly darts in and the two girls meet center stage.
Alina, thank goodness you made it.
Sorry about that, Suzy. My dad was busy with his morning prayer, and my mom couldn't track down the keys to the car.
It's okay. I'm just glad that you're here. Is your grandfather coming in to speak?
Yeah, he dropped me off at the front office, and now he's off parking the car. He should be here in a few minutes.
Alina, Suzy, do you want to come up here and take your seats?
Suzy and Alina move into chairs next to Elaine and Giselle. There is one empty chair at the other end.
All right, class. Thank you for coming in and settling down quickly and quietly. As you know, we've just finished up our section on the Holocaust and the end of World War II. Just a reminder that we'll be having a test on the subject next week, so be sure to go over your review questions and your class notes. Today, we are very fortunate to be joined by two people to share their first-hand experience on the war and to answer any questions you might have. One of our speakers is your classmate Alina's grandfather, Mr. William Voyachek, who is a citizen of Czechoslovakia that served in the Russian army. He's apparently not here yet, but we're hoping to hear from him shortly. But first, we're very lucky to have Suzy Cohen's grandmother joining us today to give testimony to what she witnessed. Mrs. Giselle Eisenberg was born in the town of Vilnius, Poland. She was a teenager, much like yourself, when the war came along and turned everything upside down. She and her family were forced into the Vilna ghetto, where she lived for over a year. From there, she was shipped off to Buchenwald and then on to Auschwitz. I believe she's going to start off by sharing a story with you, and then I hope there'll be time for a short question and answer session. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a warm welcome to Mrs. Giselle Eisenberg.
Mrs. Cavendish sits down, and Giselle takes her place, looking somewhat stooped and enfeebled. As she begins to speak, and her memories come back to her, she regains the posture and the vigor of her youth.
The first thing the Nazis took from you when you got to the camps was your identity, your sense of who you are. The guards and the capos couldn't handle the concept that we were people, fellow human beings. So we had to become subhuman, Untermenschen, a shallow figure, a statistic that they could feed into their calculating machines and tabulate in their fat leather ledgers. They stripped us naked, cut off our hair. All of us together, our nudity mixed with our shame. And then they would split us apart, separate us, the men one way, the women the next. Families ripped asunder, mothers, fathers, sisters.
Giselle pauses on the word sisters before she continues. And as she does, the lights shift and the company again become her fellow prisoners, with the sounds of the guards shouting and the dogs barking and the low drone of the machine grinding ever present in the background.
My parents disappeared that first morning. Our arms were linked together. My mother kept crying and saying, "Mohe Gorky, my daughters and my daughters," while my father stared straight ahead with his back stiff like a birch tree in a river, unbending in the current. I held on to my sister Alicia so tightly, clutching her body into mine as if we were two bodies, but one flesh.
There are still lights up behind Giselle where all the adults sit with Suzy and Alina. Mrs. Cavendish frowns and leans over to angrily whisper to Elaine, who shrugs her shoulders and furtively whispers back.
Every morning, they would line us up for roll call and call us by the name they had tattooed on our skin. Anyone too weak to make roll call, too tired, too old, would be beaten down by the guards and dragged off to the gas chambers. Those of us who were left, we'd be beaten as well. The guards never missed an opportunity for a beating, for the chance to experience that sick, sadistic thrill. When we were knocked to the ground, we were expected to rise right back up. And anyone who would rise right back up would be beaten down some more, until finally an acceptable percentage of us would be left, and we would be marched off to our work detail. Some of us never made it to roll call. You'd hear them whispering in the dark, some of them cursing, and some of them praying. And then you'd hear the creaking of the wooden beams and a loud popping snap. And in the morning, you'd see them dangling by their neck from whatever rope they had acquired.
All of the adults seated behind Giselle are now whispering back and forth furiously. Off to one side, William slowly enters, unseen, but lit by a small spotlight. He watches the developing scene with amused detachment as the company mirrors what Giselle is saying.
The ones that died, that took their own lives, they were the lucky ones. The rest of us had to do the hard part and continue living in this hell on earth. There was cholera and dysentery to contend with, and pneumonia, tuberculosis, and rotting food, and moldy bread, and filthy mud to drink, and the stink of the dead and the almost dead, and the body-crushing labor, and the absolute certainty that at any moment, at any given moment, you could be whisked off to the Waffens, and none of it mattered. None of it would be worth it. All the pain and the suffering and the dread and the awful nothingness at the pit of your soul. And then sister, my dear sister, my Shayna Nadel, my beautiful girl. One day, I woke up and she was gone. She was gone. She was gone. Why did we survive then, huh? Why did we live? Why did we put up with all these tortures? So that we could somehow outlast everything and get to the end of the war and face down our abusers, those monsters, these guards, and say, you, I see you. I know you.
Giselle looks over and finally notices William. She freezes completely, and the color drains out of her face. In one quick moment, she goes from being the strong woman she was long, long ago to once again being just another old, crooked woman. And then her eyes light up. I know you. Giselle points a bony finger at William, who seems surprised.
You. I know you. I recognize your face. You are Blackfear Camel. Who called it a totem? The accountant of death. I know you, you monster. I know you.
Elaine leaps to her feet as Mrs. Cavendish gets up to try and settle the class. Principal Crocker starts fighting his way through the crowd of the company as both the belittled students and the avenging ghost pointing their own fingers at William. Suzy runs over to Giselle. Elena runs over to William. Elaine gets to her mother and tries to calm her down.
I know you.
Grandma,
All right, everybody take your seats. Everybody take your seats.
I know.
The lights go out, except for a single spot on Giselle, who stands, still pointing, her back straight, her face flushed with anger and pride.
I know.
Giselle smiles. End of scene. End of Act 1. Shouting their now familiar refrain. Oh, jeez, sei still. Don't Juden. On the back wall, we again see the ranks of German soldiers, the SS regiments, the sneering Nazi salutes. We see flashes of dead bodies, smokestacks, of dogs, and barbed wire fence. We hold on a shot of the gateway to Auschwitz. Arbeit macht frei. Work makes you free. Giselle appears in spotlight on one side of the stage.
All that I will tell you is unquestionably true. There is no doubt, no uncertainty, no vagueness or obscurity. There will always be things I will forget in this world. I tell you this now. I will never forget his face.
The sounds start up again with the guards cursing and moving up to the forefront. The lights come up dimly to show the company standing in rigid attention, dressed now as camp prisoners, their faces gaunt and weary. A voice comes up that is counting in German. 1, 5, 0, 0, 9. 1, 5, 0, 1, 0. 1, 5, 0, 1, 1.
The guards at the camp will play a game with us each morning. Are you hungry, June? Did you get enough to eat? We have cake and strudel in the mess hall up the hill. Are your shoes all right? Let us know, and we'll get you some nice new boots. Are you tired, Juden? We can take you to a place where you can sleep all you want for the rest of your life. For the rest of your life.
Several members of the company collapse. As they do, almost immediately, other members of the company dressed as guards appear and hastily haul them off stage.
In our prison block, the worst of them all was SS Blockführer Camel. He would never directly engage with the prisoners. He never swung a baton or used a knife to carve out the flesh, or choked or kicked or spat on anyone. But he never seemed to speak to his men. The ones that were so gleefully playing into the sadistic games. He stood there, tall and straight-backed, with his uniform pressed and his boots polished to a perfect sheen. And he would just glance at someone. That's it. Just a glance, a look. He would look, and he would frown, and he would write down in his notebook. And the people whose names he would scribble down, the next day, they would just vanish, disappear, as if they had never been in the first place, as if your memory of their existence was a lie in itself.
More members of the company appear as guards and start rapidly dragging off the prisoners, some of whom kick and scream mutely, others who seem to be resigned to their fate. Giselle finishes speaking as the last of them are dragged away.
He never called SS Blockführer Carmona by name. To us, he was Buchhalter der Toten, the accountant of death. And when he had marked you in his ledger, you knew your time had come.
Lights fade out on Giselle and come up on William, looking somewhat sick.
My name is Willem Thomas Wojciech, and I'm from the village of Mohenice in the Olmok region of the Czech Republic. I was born there in 1918 and went off to school at University Karlova, or Charles University, when I turned 16. My studies were interrupted by the German invasion in the fall of 1938. I fled east into Poland and then into Soviet Russia, where I enlisted with the 322nd Rifle Division. I fought at the Battle of Stalingrad. Did I tell you about the Battle of Stalingrad? When the blockade began, we ate our livestock. And when we ran out of livestock, we ate our horses. And when we ran out of that, we ate mud and dirt and grass and anything to fill our empty bellies. I had friends who died in Stalingrad. I had friends who died all across the Eastern Front. I fought side by side with the Allies against the Germans. What does this old woman say that I am? A Nazi? An SS officer? Some mythical, fantastical accountant of death? I'm a father of 3, and a grandfather of 9, and an insurance clerk for 30 years, and a husband and a good man. I am not the creature this woman imagines me to be.
Lights fade on William and come up again on Giselle.
Yes, it is him. Of course it is him. What? Do you expect him to admit it? To confess his crime? Like he's up on the stand of some old Perry Mason movie? He lies. Yes, of course he lies. Of course it is him. I recognized him at once. What has it been? 40 years? 5,000 miles? Of course it is him. I recognized him at once. He's put on some weight, his skin sags, he is wrinkled and gray, his hair is white, he walks with a cane. But it is him, goddammit! Of course it is him. His eyes are the same as they ever were. Blue and cold and empty and pitiless. The way that he looks at you, his slight mocking smile. I will never forget his face. It is him, I will swear it. Of course it is him. I recognized him at once. I will never forget his face.
Lights fade on Giselle and come up again on William.
It's not me, I tell you. It's not me. I fought against the Nazis. Well, look, did my granddaughter tell you? I was one of the soldiers who liberated the camp. I marched through the gates of Auschwitz. I cared for those people. I bought them clothes. I served them hot soup. Why does she think I am this Karl Müller person? I don't even know that name. My name is Willem Thomas Wojciech, and I am from the village of Mohenice. My wife's name is Anna. My daughter's name is Sarah. Why would anyone think that I could be someone who did these horrible things? That I could in any way be connected with these monstrous atrocities? It is not me, I tell you, it is not me.
Lights fade out, then come up immediately on both Giselle and William.
It is him, I tell you. It is him, it is him. He is Blockführer Karl Müller, the accountant of death.
I am Willem Thomas Wojciech from the village of Mohenice. My wife's name is Anna. My daughter's name is Sarah. We have children, grandchildren. Look, I have photos. I can show you photos. I am not a monster. I'm just a simple man.
He is a Shaden, a demon, a liar, and a snake. Does he resemble now a harmless old man, hobbled and grey, walking with a cane? Do not be deceived. I tell you once again, he is Blockführer Karl Müller, the accountant of death.
We hear once again, as in the distance, the grinding of the machine, now mixed with a new sound, the moaning of millions of eager and vengeful ghosts.
Please, I beg of you, ask my family. Ask anyone. I'm just an old man, here to visit his daughter and her family, to see my granddaughter, my blessed Elaine, for the first time. I'm not a Nazi. I'm not a murderer or a monster.
I am sure of this as I am my own name. I would swear it in court. I would swear it in the presence of God.
I am Willem Wojciech, from a village of Mohenice.
He is Blockführer Karl Müller, the accountant of death.
The sound crescendos, then cuts out. End of scene. Act 2, Scene 2. The office of Principal Crocker, who sits behind his desk. Elaine and Suzy sit in front of him. Mrs. Cavendish is off to one side.
I'm not exactly sure what you want us to do.
What does it matter what I want you to do? This man is a Nazi. He needs to be brought to justice.
Allegedly.
What?
Well, what I think Principal Crocker is saying, Suzy, is that it's important to look at the facts. Mr. Wojciech is...
Karl Müller. His name is Karl Müller.
We're not saying that your grandmother is wrong. We're just saying that he's not the man he claims he is. Or she claims he is. We're just saying, well, he must realize there isn't any proof.
What do you mean there isn't any proof? You have eyewitness testimony. She was there. She knows what he did.
Allegedly. What he allegedly did.
Suzy, please bear in mind, it's not that we don't believe your grandmother. It's that we have to be sure. A man's life and his reputation are on the line.
His reputation? Really? Is that what this is about?
Suzy.
How about the reputation of the millions of people who died in Auschwitz? How about the people like my grandmother who survived? What kind of life do you think she had? What would you say about her reputation?
Look, Suzy,
This isn't the first time that your grandmother has been accused of mistaken identity.
Oh, really?
She apparently told the authorities 20 years ago that her co-worker was a secretary in Buchenwald. She later admitted that she must have been mistaken, but, well, that's the sort of accusation that you can never walk back.
Who said that? Who told you that? Where did you hear that story?
Suzy, dear, that's not what's important now.
Well, with all due respect, Mrs. Cavendish, I think it's extremely important. Now, you're talking about my grandmother's reputation, and you're making these accusations. And you're both standing there, assaulting her character.
No.
Suzy, please believe us when we say we think very highly of your grandmother and everything she's been through. But, I mean, that's part of the problem, right? All she's been through and all of the suffering and the anguish. You You can't help but be changed by something like that. You can't help but see demons lurking in every corner.
You're saying she imagined the whole thing? That she made it up?
You have to see things from our perspective, Miss Cohen. A lot of people her age have trouble remembering. What proof do we have that her mind is still sound?
Suzy rolls up her shirt sleeve and shows off the faded numbers that she had written out in a Sharpie marker.
A15011. You can still see it there where I couldn't rub it off. 815011.
Suzy, I'm sorry. I don't know what that means.
That's my mother's number from when she was in the camp. The number that the Nazis tattooed on her arm.
A15011. She told me that number and she recited it from memory. A15011. They gave her that number 40 years ago and she remembered it exactly ever since.
But I mean, isn't that number printed right there on her arm?
No, that's the point. She remembered it. She didn't need to read it off. She remembered the name the same way she remembered Carl Mueller.
Mrs. Cohen, where is your mother right now?
I brought her home. I slipped a Valium in her cup of tea.
What? You drugged her? You left her alone?
It was for her own good, Suzy. You saw how worked up she was.
It's probably for the best. Give her some time to rest and some time to reconsider. Maybe this will all blow over in a day or two. Is something funny, Principal Crocker?
No. I mean, yes. Well, not so much funny. I guess as Pollyannish is the word. Foolishly optimistic. You saw the students in that class, Gwen. A bunch of middle school teenagers tittering away who couldn't wait to get home to tell their folks what happened in school today. Mark my word, there'll be a line of parents outside my door tomorrow morning. We'll be lucky if it doesn't make the evening news, especially with the Jewish angle.
Good. It needs to be on the news. People need to know.
Suzy, I know you're angry. I know you're upset.
Upset? Oh, you don't know the half of it.
Sweetie, just think of what all this stress is doing to your grandmother. I know she likes to imagine herself an avenging angel.
Really, Mom?
But you know I've been worried about her for some time.
Mrs. Cohen, Elaine, maybe it would be best if you went back home to your mother. It's probably not safe for her to be there on her own, and besides, I'm sure all of you need some time to discuss this as a family.
I don't see the good discussing things will do.
Well, I do. You're my daughter, and as long as you're living under my roof, you'll do as I say. Go get your things and wait in the car. I'll be right there.
Suzy jumps up, clearly upset, and starts to say something before she sees the look in her mother's eyes. Suzy exits in a huff.
I'm sorry for stirring up all this trouble, Elaine. Bob, I'm sorry for everything.
It's been a long time coming. I knew when my father died, when I moved my mom into the house, that there could be trouble. She wasn't the easiest person to deal with when I was a child. But I thought it would be good for Suzy to have her grandmother close by. And I thought maybe if I got my mother out of that dark apartment.
I understand, Miss Cohen. You do the best you can for your parents, but you never really know. Well, I guess I should call up the superintendent and try to hit this off at the pass. I'll probably have to call half the school board. And of course, there'll be paperwork. Good God, all the paperwork.
Paperwork? What kind of paperwork?
Oh, believe me, there'll be all sorts of paperwork. In the public school system, there's always paperwork. Thank God this wasn't a racial issue. The press would have tarred and feathered me and ran me out of town on the radio.
Wait, 1 minute. Are you saying that the Holocaust wasn't a racial issue?
Well, of course there was a racial component, Elaine, but it's not like, well, you know what we mean.
I'm not sure that I do.
It's just that a lot of people get bent out of shape when it comes to the Holocaust. For some reason, when the Jews are involved, we all have to walk around on eggshells. I mean, for heaven's sakes, it's not like they are real-life Nazis marching around. I mean, times have changed. People have changed. For Christ's sakes, it's not the 1940s anymore.
I'm sorry, but you're wrong. You're both wrong.
I beg your pardon?
You're wrong, Gwen. You're wrong, Bob, about the Holocaust, about the Jews, about the Nazis. It may not be the 1940s, but there are still plenty of people walking around with hate in their heart. It may be the 1980s, but there are still Nazis. Times may change, but people never change.
Yes,
There will
well.
always be Nazis.
Well, anyway, I'd better get started on those phone calls.
Of course. And I'd better track down my daughter and try to smooth things over.
Elaine and Mrs. Cavendish stand. Mrs. Cavendish reaches out to touch Elaine on the shoulder.
I'm sorry, Elaine. I'm sorry for all the trouble I've caused. You have my number. Call me if you need anything.
I can't imagine there's anything more you can do. But thank you for the offer. I guess I'll get home and deal with the thunderstorm.
Elaine and Mrs. Cavendish both exit. End of scene. Act 2, Scene 3. Giselle is standing alone in darkness.
His name is Karl Müller. Karl Johann Müller. Blockführer der Stolaroff, Battalion Commander Supervisor for Blocks 2 through 12. Blockführer Karl Müller. Karl Johann Müller, I know you. I know you. I know you.
The company walks slowly on the stage, again assuming the visage of gray ghosts. They start slowly circling Giselle, reaching out to her. She puts her hand out to grasp them, but their fingers never seem to touch. Between them, behind them, hidden from view, obfuscated and vague, is William. He wears clothes that would somewhat suggest a uniform, but he is never quite in focus. We can never fully make him out. Giselle wobbles a bit and appears a bit unsteady and uncertain.
His name is Karl Müller, the accountant of death.
We hear the crisp sound of clunking boots and the guttural shouts of the German command. On a rear projection, we see lines of marching soldiers. The image is just slightly out of focus. The face is impossible to see. Giselle spins around, sees the images, frowns, and strains to see them clearly.
I know you, Karl Müller. I know you. I see you.
William continues to move agonizingly closer to Giselle. The company swirls about her more rapidly, twirling, spinning, their form and their outstretched arms like a gathering storm. Giselle sways a bit in their rhythm and holds her hands up to the sky.
Almole Rachamin, Shohem Bamrunin, Ametsei Nucha and Nucha, Al Kamfe Hasheshina.
The company moves in ever closer, and now they are tearing off swaths from Giselle's simple clothing until finally she is stripped naked and she falls to her knees, clutching her arms over her chest in a futile attempt at modesty.
I see you, Karl Müller. I see you.
Giselle weeps as the company continues to dance around her, pulling scissors out of their pockets and snapping at the sky. William suddenly vanishes from their midst, and Giselle cries out,
No! No! I cannot lose you again. I promise to remember. I promise to remember you all.
From the back of the company comes the young girl who resembles Alicia. She walks over to the prone form of Giselle and wraps her arms around her. Giselle embraces her, sobbing openly as we again hear the grinding of the machine. The young girl begins slowly, affectionately, almost reverently, dressing Giselle in a simple striped gray prisoner's gown. The sound of the machine and the marching boots mixes with a chorus of Jewish voices, rising up in song triumphantly.
I let you go, Alicia. I tried to protect you. And one day you were gone. I failed you, dear sister. I tried to protect you, and then I let you go. I will not forget you. I will never forgive. I will never forget.
At the back of the stage, we see William's silhouette, and Giselle forces herself to stand on her feet. She faces the shadowed forms and screams out her defiant accusation.
I know you, Carl Miller. I will never forget. I see you there. I know what you did.
We hear laughing, and the shadow begins to fade as Giselle sways.
I know you, Carl Miller. I know you. I know you.
The company freezes. Giselle collapses on the stage. End of scene. Act 2, Scene 4. Suzy walks out and goes to her locker, carrying her backpack over one shoulder. She slams open the locker door and begins angrily stuffing textbooks into her bag. Alina enters and stands, watching Suzy for a moment before finally speaking.
Suzy?
Suzy turns and sees Alina standing still. After a brief second, the two girls race to each other and embrace, crying a bit.
Alina, are you all right?
I'm fine, Suzy, I'm fine. Are you okay?
I'm okay, but my mother is being horrible. She left my grandmother at home, doped up and dozing. I can't believe she's being such a bitch.
I know what you mean, Suzy. I can't believe it either. I can't believe any of it.
What do you mean, Alina? When you say can't believe any of it?
I mean, come on, Suzy. I always knew that your grandmother was a little bit crazy, but...
She's not crazy, Alina. She was telling the truth. She saw what she saw.
Oh, come on, Suzy. Don't be naive.
You don't believe her? You don't believe what she said?
Believe what? That Auschwitz was a horrible place? That they did terrible, unspeakable things? That they killed millions and millions of innocent people?
Jews, Alina. They killed millions of Jews.
Yes, Jews, of course. I'm not denying any of that. They killed Jews and gypsies and communists and gay people.
You keep saying they did those things. Who is it that you think we're talking about here?
The Nazis, obviously. The SS and the German High Command.
Is that what you think? Is that what you believe?
What am I supposed to believe?
Now who's being naive?
What, do you mean that nonsense you said about my grandfather? Because come on, Suzy, you know that's not true. You can look at him. He is a harmless old man. You know there's no way that any of that is true.
So you don't think your grandfather is Blockbearer Carl Mueller, the accountant of death? I wrote a paper on him one time. Did I tell you about that?
What, you wrote a paper? About your grandmother's wacky stories?
I did some research into the camp hierarchy as a part of that History Day project Miss Cavendish wanted us to do. Carl Mueller was an actual person, Alina. He disappeared at the end of the war and the camps were being liberated. He just slipped away. They tried an amnestia, and at the end of the war, at the courts of Nuremberg, they found him guilty and they sentenced him to death. He must have escaped the camps before the Allies got there. Somehow found his way to the front lines.
Stop, Suzy, stop. That's completely insane. You know what happened. You can't seriously expect me to believe all this nonsense.
Nonsense? Really? You think this is nonsense? Really? Really?
Yes, really. Yes, really. You heard me tell the story before. You know what actually happened. My grandfather was one of the Russians that liberated Auschwitz. Your grandmother was probably sick and starving and more than halfway delusional. She saw the Russian soldiers and she just confused one person for the next.
My grandmother would never mistaken anyone for Carl Mueller. She saw his face every morning when they would line up for the roll call. Her recollection is perfectly clear.
Please, Suzy, you know that's not true. Your grandmother probably thinks that the janitor is a Nazi. She probably believes that Mrs. Cavendish is Eva Braun and that Principal Crocker is the devil himself.
Your grandfather is the devil. He sent thousands of people to their death.
My grandfather is a hero. He saved thousands of people.
He is Blockbearer Carl Mueller.
He's not. He's not. How could you say such a thing?
Alina takes a few steps back, openly weeping. Suzy attempts to comfort her.
I know this is hard. I know that you want to believe believe. Your mother probably told you all of these nice stories about her father, your grandfather, and you want to believe that the stories are true. But the truth isn't always nice, Alina. And we're much too grown up to believe in these fairy tales.
Alina turns away a bit, and then suddenly rounds on Suzy, her face full of fury.
Fairy tales! Fairy tales! It's you who believes in fairy tales, Suzy. You and that witch of a grandmother making wild accusations and spreading poison to everyone around her. You know what she's doing, right? Playing on everybody's sympathies, making everybody feel sorry for her. So typical. Oh, the poor, poor old woman with her nightmarish stories and her terrible past. We all have to listen to her, and we all have to believe her. The speaker for the dead, the witness to the Holocaust, the Jew.
Suzy stares at Alina for a moment, her eyes wide. Alina glares back, and then seems to soften a bit.
Suzy, I'm sorry. You know I didn't mean that.
I thought I knew you. I thought we were friends.
I'm sorry I got upset and I said things that I didn't mean to say.
I thought I knew you. I thought we were friends.
Alina tries to reach out, but Suzy slams the locker shut and storms off stage. Alina watches her go with tears in her eyes.
I am your friend. We said we'd always be friends.
End of scene. Act 2, Scene 5. Back at the Cohen house. It is almost dusk, and all the lights are out. Giselle is sitting in the kitchen, staring out the window at the sunset. We watch her sit silently for a measure before moving on. Suzy storms in, unloading her backpack on the table in a huff. Elaine follows her, looking tired and worn out.
I can't believe you, Mom. I can't believe what you've done.
Suzy, please, calm yourself down. I know you're a teenage girl and your life is always a torrent of emotions, but for just once, I could do without the histrionics.
Don't talk to me like I'm a child, Mother.
And don't talk to me as if we're equals. You're right, Susanna Elise Cohen. I am your mother, and you will treat me with the respect I deserve, or I swear to you.
What are you gonna do? Abandon me? Like you did with Grandma?
My, isn't it nice to be included in the conversation?
Oh, Grandma Gizzy, I was so worried about you. Are you feeling okay? Why are you sitting in the dark?
I wasn't in the dark, my child. I was resting in the picture window, watching the sky light up with the sunset. I like to see the sunrise from this window, Suzanne. And I like to see the sunset. The beginnings and endings by Shana Madel. The olive and the tough. How old things start and how old things end.
Did you get any sleep, Mama? I was worried about you, too.
Suzy rolls her eyes. Giselle gets up and walks over to her daughter.
I know that you care for me, daughter. I know that you love me.
Giselle embraces Elaine, who seems surprised, but who returns the embrace. Suzy stomps her feet.
Really, Grandma? Really? You're just going to hug her and forget all of the terrible things that she's done to her. After all of that, you're going to let bygones be bygones?
Granddaughter, you'll find that when you reach my age,
Terrible things? What terrible things?
Oh, you're really going to play dumb?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Back at the principal's office?
what is this now?
Grandma Gizzy, do you remember that time, a long time ago, when you made an accusation about your coworker that ended up being wrong?
What?
About 20 years ago, you said she was a typist at Buchenwald.
But there was a woman, back when we lived in Evanstown. Her name was Esther. She worked at the steno pool. She looked just like one of the Hefferinen at the camp.
Here, Mother, why don't you sit down at the table?
Elaine helps Giselle to a chair, then rounds on Suzy.
How dare you?
What do you mean?
How dare you try to turn your grandmother against me? How dare you speak with righteous indignation about things you clearly know nothing about?
Principal Crocker and Miss Cavendish knew. They both knew about the incident with Grandma. How could they have known? You must have been the one to tell them.
I would never have told them. You know, at the time.
How could they have known, Mother? Tell me, how could they have known?
Elaine takes a seat in one of the other chairs at the table. She looks at her hands and then speaks.
You know that Gwen, Mrs. Cavendish and I are friends, you know, outside of school. We went out to dinner a few times, and we had drinks, and I was telling her about my life growing up in Chicago. Suzy, you don't know what it was like when the story got out. There were newspaper men in our front lobby. There were telephone calls, and all the neighbors were gossiping.
I guess that makes it all right then. Poor Mommy had it so hard growing up.
Elaine jumps to her feet, but Giselle gets to Suzy first. She grabs Suzy and shakes her a bit.
Who do you think you are, talking to your mother that way? Huh? Are you the parent now, speaking down to your child?
Elaine gets to Giselle and pulls her off of Suzy, who is taken aback.
Shh, Mama. It's all right. It's all right. I've got this, Mama. I've got this. It's all right.
She guides Giselle back to her seat and then turns to face Suzy.
Suzanne Elise Cohen, you go straight to your room.
But
You heard what I said. Get upstairs this instant. Now! Go!
Suzy looks as if she's about to say something, then bursts into tears and goes running upstairs. After she's gone, Elaine sags a bit, then walks over to the stove to make herself a cup of tea.
She'll be all right. You'll be all right. It's the job of the young to tax the old.
She's definitely been taxing me more and more. Everything I do seems to set her off. Everything I do seems to be wrong.
That reminds me of someone when they were her age.
You can't possibly tell me I was that bad.
There's an old Jewish proverb that says that children should be locked in a box from the time they are born until the day they become a teenager, with a flap on the front to pass in food.
And when they become a teenager,
Nail down the flap!
I do love you, Mama. I hope you know that. I'm glad you're here with me. And I'm glad that you're here for Suzy.
It's like the saying in Proverbs, my daughter. Grandchildren are the crown of the aged, while the glory of children is their ancestors.
That's nice. What does it mean?
I have no idea, but it certainly sounds good.
Oh, I suppose I should go talk to her. Give her a chance to yell at me a little more. Would you like me to get you a cup of tea, Mother?
I'll get it myself. You go upstairs and spend some time with your daughter.
Elaine nods and exits up the stairs. Giselle gets up and walks into the kitchen. The lights dim across the stage and strikes Giselle in a spot. She pours herself a cup of tea and stirs it with a spoon, staring off into the distance, where we begin to hear the familiar sounds, the grinding of the machine, the shouts of the guards, even the triumphant hymnal of the Jewish voices, before they are all interrupted by the sound of a loud knock on the door. Silence. Giselle walks over and opens the front door. Then she takes a step back. William steps briefly into the doorway, holding a hat in his hands.
I'm sorry to disturb you, madam. May I come in?
End of scene. Act 2, Scene 6. Giselle is standing alone in the dark, lit by a single light.
I would like to tell you 3 stories. One of fear, one of fantasy, and one that is a fact. It's a game we would play as children growing up in the Jewish quarter. 2 lies and a truth. But the object was to trick someone into believing what you say is true. You tell them 3 things, and they get to figure out what to believe. Which was the fiction, which was the fact. I will tell you my 3 stories and leave it to you to decide. Number 1.
My apologies for showing up at your home unannounced. This is a very nice home. You look very nice neighborhood.
It is my daughter's home. You have no right to be here. Why did you come? What is it that you want? Why do you darken my doorstep, Karl Müller?
Karl Müller. Karl Müller. Now, that is a name I have not heard for a long, long time. I am Wilhelm Thomas Wojciech from the village of Mohenice. My wife's name is Anna. My daughter's name is Sarah.
I know who you are, who you pretend to be.
I am Wilhelm Thomas Wojciech from the village of Mohenice. I work as an insurance agent, and I'm a member in standing of the Komunistika Strana Czechoslovenska, the ruling Czech party. I served 2 terms on the neighborhood council, and I'm documented for national on a travel visa in America.
You are Karl Müller.
I am Wilhelm Thomas Wojciech. I am who I say I am. I'm a quiet, respectable citizen. I'm a businessman. I'm professional. I'm respectable. I am Wilhelm Thomas Wojciech, and I am who I say I am. The question I must ask is, who exactly are you?
What do you mean? I am Giselle Hannah Eisenberg, a survivor of Auschwitz.
You are an elderly woman, gray-haired and feeble-minded. You're a stranger to your neighbors, an ugly foreigner, a pestilence, plague. You're a dark-eyed Jew in a blue-eyed America. Nobody wants you here, and nobody will believe your tale.
You're wrong. You're lying. You are Karl Jonas Müller.
I am Wilhelm Thomas Wojciech. I am who I say I am, what I present myself to be. But who are you that they should believe you? How do you present yourself? Looking frantic and making wild accusations. Why should they listen to you? Who will believe you? A crazy old hag, a lunatic, a Jew.
No. No. I know what I saw. I know who you are. They will listen to my story. They will believe what I say.
William puts his hat back on his head and starts going out the door. He stops and turns right before he heads out.
When you look in your family's eyes, what do you see? Dismissal and doubt. Suspicion and shame. If they don't believe you, who will? Who could? You should have died a long time ago, Frau Eisenberg. I'm sorry you didn't die back at Auschwitz.
William exits. The lights go out again, leaving Giselle alone in her spotlight.
In the camp, there was a foolish man named David who would offer up prayers every night to a God that gave no response. I say of Yahweh, my refuge and my fortress, my Elohim, in him will I trust. 1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come to thee. Only with thine eyes shalt thou behold and see the reward of the wicked. The men of the camp would ask him, what is the use of praising God? What is the use of these empty words? And he would look at us, and he would shrug, and he would say, well, what else is left? What else is left? That was fear. That was the nightmare of doubt. That was the sunset. The next story is of the light, of hope, and a daydream.
Lights come up again on William standing in the doorway, again with his hat in his hand.
Number 2.
My apologies for showing up at your home unannounced. This is a very nice home in a very nice neighborhood.
It is my daughter's home. You have no right to be here. Why did you come? What is it you want? Why do you darken my doorstep, Karl Müller?
This is a nice home, madam, in a very nice neighborhood. Your daughter's home, the woman that was with you at the school today, your granddaughter, beautiful. She's friends with my granddaughter. You know her, Alina? A brilliant girl, wonderful girl, a kind person, a good friend. It makes me glad for Eisenberg to see that you are happy, to see that you survived.
You have no right to be happy for me, Herr Müller. You have forfeited the right to take pleasure or feel joy.
You're right, of course. I don't have any right to be here. I don't have any right to speak to you in this matter. During the war, I know, we did horrible things. I did horrible things. We were under orders, of course. I know they said it shouldn't have mattered, but you have to understand that the German army...
They trained you to be a soldier?
Yes.
They trained you to be a killer?
Yes.
They didn't train you to murder innocent people, Blackfurmuller. They didn't teach you to hate us.
You are right, of course. You are not wrong, but also not completely right. I was raised in a time when everyone believed that the Jews were our enemies. Everyone thought that the Jews were subhuman. I was assigned to read the protocols of the Elders of Zion in secondary school. I was shown evolutionary charts proving the superiority of the Aryan race. And this was accepted as scientific fact by many people, even in this country. I didn't know. I couldn't have known.
You saw us every day, Herr Müller. You saw us in the flesh. You saw us with your own eyes. You saw us when we bled. You saw us when we screamed.
I was a coward for Eisenberg. I was afraid to say anything.
You were a monster.
Yes. Yes. I was a monster. I was a monster who did monstrous things. I made the list every day at fall call. You were right. I wrote down the names and the numbers. I decided who would live and who would die. I was following orders, but yes, I could have stopped. I could have said no. You asked me why I am here. You asked me what it is that I want. What I want, madam, what I need is to tell you I'm sorry. I am sorry for what I did. I am here to beg for your forgiveness. I know what I did. I know what I did was wrong. I will tell them you were right. I will confess all of my terrible crimes. I will turn myself in and accept the horrible fate that met my co-conspirators. I am a monster who did monstrous things. And if I swing from the gallows or spend the rest of my pathetic life staring at the world through prison bars, I know that it is nothing. Nothing next to the pain that I put your people through. But please, I beg of you. I beg of you, accept my worthless admissions and take me at my word. I am sorry. I am sorry. I am sorry for my sins. Confiteo Deo omnipotenti, beata Maria, semper Virgini, omnibus sanctis et tibi, Pater, ira peccavi, nimis cogitationi, verbo et opera.
No! 1,000 times no! 10,000! 6 million! You will answer for your crimes here on earth, Herr Müller. And then you will answer to the God who sits in judgment and be eternally damned to the pits of Gehenna.
William reaches out to Giselle, begging.
No, Blackfigure, no. You will not find absolution in this life or the next. Get out of my daughter's house. Get out, Karl Jonas Müller. Blackfigure of death and bookkeeper of death. Get out! Get out! And be gone!
Lights go out, leaving Giselle again in her single spot, breathing heavily. She pauses for a bit before she speaks.
When I was a very young child, there was a traveling puppet show that set up a booth on the street in the market square. I remember the little marionettes bouncing back and forth, bumping into each other. the red-cheeked young lady, the square-jawed hero, and my favorite, the comical little Zydic, the Jewish clown. And he had a heavy hump, with his hook nose, singing his songs and dancing the Mayufes. They're for children. We would enjoy the funny little actors and live at the silly morality play. And then we would pick up our things and head back home. We knew fact from fiction. We were children, true. But we were not fools.
Lights come up again on William, standing in the doorway, again with his hat in his hands.
Number 3.
My apologies for showing up at your home unannounced. This is a very nice home in a very nice neighborhood.
It is my daughter's home. You have no right to be here. Why did you come? What is it you want? Why do you knock at my doorstep, Carmilla?
You called me by that name, dear woman, when we were at school. Tell me, who is that person? What has he done to you?
You know who he is, Bloodfuhrer. You know what he's done. He is you. Buchhalter der Toten, the accountant of death. Karl Jonas Müller, member of the Schutzstaffel, commander of the Wach Battalion. You know who you are. You know what you've done.
My name is Wilhelm Thomas Wojciech, from the village of Mohenice. My wife's name is Anna, and my daughter's name is Sarah.
You keep repeating the same lies, Herr Müller. I know who you are. I recognize your face.
I do not know who you are, madam. I apologize. I am old. Sometimes I get confused. My granddaughters tease me sometimes and tell me I can't tell them apart, that I can't remember their names.
I know who you are. You are Karl Jonas Müller.
I am a simple old man who has lived far too many years.
Don't try and play the fool with me.
I am sorry for what this man did to you. I am sorry for everything that was done. I remember when the Nazis first started rising up in their country.
Your country.
Beating up old Jews in the street, smashing shop windows.
Kristallnacht, the night of the broken glass.
No one ever thought that they would be allowed to hold office. No one ever thought these roughnecks, these hooligans, would take over the chancellery.
You are a member of the Nazi party, Herr Müller. You were one of them.
Me? I'm an insurance agent. I file paperwork and have meetings with pensioners.
You are a monster, a murderer. And again, you were responsible for the death of untold thousands.
Me? A monster? Some mornings I can't even find my own shoes. My recollections are foggy now. Some mornings I forget my wife's name, or the name of my daughter, or what I had for dinner the night before, or where I left the mail. Tell me, madam, is your mind still as sharp? Your memory so precise?
There are things I remember, Karl Müller. There are things I will never forget.
William fidgets with his hat and then starts heading out the door.
Then I envy you, dear woman. And perhaps I pity you as well. Some memories of the past are best left in the past. I am sorry you can't let go. I am sorry for all of your pain and suffering. In any event, I wish you good day.
William puts on his hat and heads out the door, leaving it open behind him. Giselle stares at the door for a moment, then runs to the door and calls out,
Karl Jonas Müller! I know who you are. I see you there. I remember your face, Blockführer Müller, the accountant of death. I see you. I see you! I see you!
End of scene. Act 2, Scene 7. The lights come up on Giselle right where we left her, standing in the doorway, screaming out,
Karl Müller! Karl Müller! Karl Müller!
Elaine and Suzy come running down the stairs.
What is it, Mother? What's happening? What are you doing?
It was him, Karl Müller, at the door. And then him standing in our hall.
Suzy runs over to her grandmother. Elaine looks out the door, left and right.
There's no one here, Mama. There's no one on the street.
He was here. I tell you, he came to our house. He was here. The accountant, the bookkeeper, he was here. He was here.
It's okay, Grandma. It's okay. Let's go sit down.
Suzy leads Giselle over to the table and into a chair. Elaine looks again up and down the street and then closes and locks the front door.
Mama, you mean to say that you saw Carl Mueller? That he was here? That he came to our house?
Did you speak to him, Grandma? What did he say?
Yes, he was here. I spoke to him, and he said that he was sorry.
Looking concerned, Elaine goes over to the stovetop and pours out a mug of tea.
He was sorry? He admitted what he did? He confessed to his crimes?
He said many things. I don't know his face. You should have seen him. His eyes were so black, so blank, so expressionless.
Elaine brings the cup to Giselle.
Here you go, Mother. Drink some of your tea.
Giselle reaches out an unsteady hand to take the cup handle. Suzy places her hand over Giselle's, stopping her.
What are you doing, Mother? Trying to drug her again?
What? Drug me?
It's just tea, daughter. She's been through a lot. She needs to get some rest.
You mean that she's been through a lot? You need the rest?
What is this?
Suzy, stop. Your grandmother is obviously incoherent, perhaps even delusional, imagining that the Nazis are coming to our door.
She isn't delusional. She was not imagining.
Oh, really? You believe her?
Yes, I believe her. Of course, I believe her.
She goes into your school on the one day that an SS camp commandant just happens to be there for show and tell. And after 40 years, she recognizes him, name, rank, and serial number.
You know how she remembers things.
And then that same Carl Mueller just happens to show up at our house unannounced. How did he get here, Suzy? Where did he get our address?
I don't know, Mom. Maybe the school gave it to him. Maybe he slipped into the principal's office. Maybe he got it out of the phone book.
Just listen to yourself, Suzy. I know you want to believe.
Believe? What do you mean, believe?
I believe everything that Grandma has told me. I believe that she recognized this man,
Carl Jonas Mueller.
Carl Jonas Mueller, the accountant of debt. She saw him in the school. She knows who he is. He's a criminal, a murderer. He needs to stand trial.
Based on what? The testimony of an eyewitness.
Yes.
The memory of one old woman.
Yes, Mom, yes. They'll listen to her. They'll believe what she says.
You know that your memory is unreliable, Suzy. You said it yourself. Your grandmother isn't remembering what happened in 1945. She remembered a time in 1946 that she remembered 1945. And then in 47, and in 48, and 49, passing down the memories, one by one, year by year, each one a Xerox of a Xerox, a copy of a copy. And with each passing year, the images, they get blurred. The dark lines get burnished.
That is not true.
What she thinks she remembers are only ghosts and shadows.
Giselle pounds her fist on the table, making Elaine and Suzy jump.
That is not true! My memory of those days is as strong as it ever was. I remember standing there at roll call. I remember Carl Mueller, bookholder der Toten, standing there as they called out our numbers. A15011. I remember that number. I remember that demon's face. How dare you tell me that it didn't happen?
I am not saying it didn't happen. I'm just
Of course it happened! Of course, of course! Alicia's right here. You can ask her. She knows it was him.
Suzy and Elaine freeze.
Who can we ask? Who is this standing in front of you? What is her name?
I know who Alicia is, woman. I might never forget the name of my sister.
I'm Suzy, Grandma. I'm your granddaughter. I'm right here. I'm Suzanne. I'm your granddaughter.
Yes, of course, Suzy. I know who you are. I'm sorry. I'm tired. I need to lie down.
Suzy goes over and hugs Giselle desperately as Elaine watches. The doorbell rings. Elaine walks over to the door. As she does, Suzy helps Giselle drink from her mug of tea. Elaine opens the door and reveals Alina, who is clasping her hands nervously.
Hello, Mrs. Cohen. Is Suzy there? I was hoping to talk to her.
Elaine gestures. Suzy gets up and walks over to the door. Elaine goes back and sits with her mother as the two girls talk.
What are you doing here?
My mother drove me down the street. I wanted to talk to you.
I think you said everything that needed to be said, Alina. You should go home and spend time with your grandfather.
That's what I wanted to tell you, Suzy. He's gone. He left an hour ago.
What? What do you mean, he's gone? Where did he go?
My father took him to the airport, got him a ticket back to Czechoslovakia. He said he was tired and he didn't want to cause any trouble and that he wanted to go home.
That can't be, child. Karl Jonas Müller, your grandfather, was right here, standing right on our doorstep, no more than 10 minutes ago. You must be mistaken.
No, he left almost an hour ago. He came home from school and packed a suitcase first thing.
That's impossible. He was right here. I tell you, he was right here.
Maybe your father brought him to our house before he took him to the airport. Yes, that makes sense. That explains it. Your parents knew where our house is, and if your dad was in the car waiting, that's how you could have left our street so quickly.
I just wanted to tell you he was gone, Suzy. I'm probably never going to see him again, and I'm sorry for what I said, and I hope that we can still be friends.
Alina waits but gets no response back from Suzy. She sadly turns to go.
My mom's outside. I guess I'll see you at school tomorrow.
Alina exits. Suzy closes the door and goes back into the kitchen.
It's not too late. It's not too late. Grandma, we can call a press conference and maybe get the State Department involved. We can call up the Russian government and make sure that they bring Karl Mueller to justice.
Suzy.
No, really, Mom, we can't give it up. I can go to the library tomorrow morning and do some research into these groups. What is it, the Weisenthal Center? There was the other witnesses. Maybe there are fingerprints and photographs.
Giselle stands up, a bit unsteady. Elaine rises as well to grasp her arm.
Suzanne, my Shayna Madel, my beautiful girl. I need to lie down for a while. I need to rest. Tomorrow can be a day where we will talk and we will plan, my love. But tonight, I need to rest. I need to get some rest.
Giselle walks on her own over to the stairs with Elaine at her side.
Granddaughter.
Suzy comes running over to hug her grandmother, tears again streaming down her face. After a short embrace, she steps back. Giselle turns to Elaine.
And I love you as well, my wonderful Elaine.
I love you too, Mama. Get some rest. I'll be here whenever you need me.
Giselle places her hand on the railing and walks upstairs. Elaine and Suzy watch her go up the stairs, then turn to each other and embrace. End of scene. Epilogue. We return again to darkness. After a bit, Giselle appears, holding a bright candle in her hands.
May God remember the souls of all who have passed, of the millions who were slaughtered at the command of evil men, of the millions more to carry the burden of their experiences, the memory of their lost family and friends.
As Giselle reads off the names, we see the company appear, carrying their own small candles that light up one by one as she says their names.
Remember the soul of my grandfather Peter and his wife, my grandmother Magdalene. Remember my mother, Katharina, and my father Yannick. Remember my brother Noam. Remember my sister Alicia.
The member of the company who resembles Alicia steps up to embrace Giselle, and then all of the other people on stage do the same.
Remember my friends at the camp, Eva, Maria, Pavel, Johanna. Remember Tobias and Abelard. Remember Miriam and David. Remember Talia, Leah, Uri, and Adam. my neighbors and my friends. Remember the ones that were closest to me, and the ones that I saw, and the countless millions that died unseen by anyone but you, my Lord. Remember those who are gone, not forgotten.
Elaine and Suzy enter from opposite sides of the stage, carrying candles of their own, and meet Giselle in the center.
With my granddaughter Suzanne and my daughter Elaine, I thank you and pledge to honor the memory of all that have passed. May their souls be bound up in the bond of life with the souls of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, and with all the other righteous men and women who are in Gan Eden. And let us say, Amen.
Giselle is joined by Elaine and Suzy, and by the quiet murmurs of the dead.
Amen.
Giselle joins hands with Suzy and Elaine, and sings the prayer for the dead.
Amolei Rachamim, Shochem Bamromim, Hamatzei Menucha Nuchona, El Kaveh Hashe Shina.
The company lifts up their lights to heaven. End of scene. End of play.